So now that we know a little bit about the sunlight pump, let's find out how to install it. We already took the sunlight pump out of the packaging. The rest is still inside. So what will we find if we open up the package? We'll find our connecting cables. These cables are 7 meters long and already have the right MC4 adapters on them. They are an optimal length, so they're very practical to place your sunlight pump close to your solar panels, and you will not experience any power losses when using these cables. So please use these cables when setting up the sunlight pump. There's 2 of them, and you'll need both of them to connect your sunlight pump to your solar panels. Next up, we've got our camlock connectors. These camlock connectors go onto your hoses and are then used to place the hoses onto your pump, and it's got an easy mechanism to lock and unlock your hoses from the sunlight pump. Another element you'll find is the non-return valve. Let's have a closer look at it. The non-return valve has a mechanism inside which causes water to not flow back into, not flow back from the pump and out of the hose. So when there's water stored inside of the hose, it will not be able to return into your source. Also, it has a filtering mechanism which will protect the sunlight pump from any debris and gravel which could be floating in the water. How to connect these to the hoses? You will need a few elements. Most importantly, these are also in your package, are two clamps. So you'll need 2 clamps for every element you want to connect to a hose. And also you'll need a heat gun and some silicone. So what you do is you'd use the heat gun to heat up your hose. We definitely need you to not use fire, because fire creates a very pointed heat and will cause damage to your hoses. So you'll need to use a heat gun, which basically just heats up air and thus warms the hose. Then you can place some silicone onto your camlock connectors or onto the non-return valve, depending on what you are installing, and place it into the hose. After about 20 minutes of drying, you can pull tight the clamps onto the hose. The final product looks something like this. So you see the 2 clamps, the camlock connectors, and here is some residue silicone which has been pushed out. The same goes for the non-return valve. What we also find in our set is a disconnector for the MC4 connectors. So you'll need this to disconnect your MC4 cables without any damage. So this is the optimal way if 2 cables are connected to disconnect them. Finally, what you find inside of your box is the standard issue manual. So this has a lengthy and intricate description of everything you need to know about the sunlight pump, including things such as warning states and troubleshooting. Yeah. So if you've got a problem, this is one of the go-tos you've got. Now that we've got all our material laid out and ready, we can go over to actually setting up the pump. So we'll do this quite simply. We'll take a simple setup example. And for this, we'll use the quick guide. So the first point, when you look at the quick guide, is select location. So what you need to do is you need to find a dry and even surface on which you can place the sunlight pump, close to your water source and close to your solar panels. You see your water source should be free of particles. This means that if particles are in the water source, they could get into the pumping mechanism and damage the mechanism. So make sure that your water source is an optimal water source. We recommend building a suction well for this purpose. You also should avoid getting any shade or dirt onto your solar panels, because that will significantly decrease the power that the panels deliver to your sunlight pump, and thus decrease the water flow and the use you can make of the sunlight pump. Also, you should avoid placing the solar panel entirely horizontal, because this will increase debris and dirt accumulating on the solar panel. The slight angle will enable rain to wash off any dirt and debris off the solar panels. You should also avoid direct sunlight onto the electronics of the sunlight pump, because it could cause overheating. We heard before, maximum working temperature is up to 50 degrees. Direct sunlight onto the electronics will increase this temperature above our maximum level and render our sunlight pump potentially in a non-working state. Moving on to preparing the hose. So you've prepared your hose. We prepared it now in our lab. You might have prepared it in your workshop, but we've got our hoses ready. So we've got, for one, our suction hose with our non-return valve on one side and the cam-lock connector on the other. And we've got our pressure hose, which has again a cam-lock connector to connect to the sunlight pump. And on the other side, we've got an adapter to connect it to a little sprinkler. You might be using another connector, anything that suits your fancy, really. As you can see, these hoses are very sturdy. If I give you a close-up view of it, you'll see that they are reinforced. It's reinforced tubing, and you need this reinforced tubing because normal garden hoses would collapse under the water pressure on the suction side. So if water is being sucked, it can collapse under this pressure. But now on location, with the hoses prepared, you want to make sure that the suction side, so your non-return valve, does not touch the ground of your water source. You want it lifted above. How can we achieve this? Usually, or very often, you'd make sure that the non-return valve doesn't touch the ground by tying it off to some fixed element. In the quick guide, we've got an image of a pole, and we're using a string in this example. So we've got our pole sticking out, and we're using a string in this example to tie the suction hose away from the surface of from the bottom of the water source. So you should check your water strainer periodically, that it is not clogged up, filled with dirt, to ensure optimal running of your sunlight pump. So let's get physical. Now we can prime the pump. A very practical way to do this is with a classic PET bottle filled with water. And what we're doing here is we're filling up the pump head with water before we connect the hoses. Why do we do this? We do this because if there's no water inside of the pump head when we start it, the system is running dry for a period of time, and this causes heat to occur in our pump head, and thus it will create damage. For this, we pour water into both the suction side and the pressure side of our pump. Once your pump head is filled with water, you'll see that you're ready to connect the sunlight pump to the hoses and to your cables. First off, let's do it with the hoses. I'll connect the suction hose, so the one with the foot valve on it, to the suction side of the pump. For this, I place it onto the cam lock and then pull up both sides of my connector. Now it is firm and sturdy, and I place the other side, the suction valve, into my water source. Here we've got a simple bucket to do this. Same goes for the delivery side. I place the cam lock onto the pump and pull up the clamps to ensure a sturdy connection. In my example, I am taking water out. In my example, I'm using this bucket with water, which I am pumping from and pumping back into, so it's a circular system. Now that we've connected the hoses, we can connect the cables. What we've got here is a system which runs on batteries. This is because we're obviously indoors and there's no sun shining, so our solar panels are not receiving any power. But we've got two 12-volt batteries here, which we have linked up in series, giving us a total of 24 volts. We have connected these two batteries to a charge controller, and you can see the charge controller has several cables running in and out of it, and we've got our battery connected to the battery sign. We would have our solar panels. We could connect our solar panels to the PV side because we're indoors, we've not got a connection. But in your case in the field, you could well connect your solar panels onto the PV side. And then we've got our load, which is in our case, obviously, the sunlight pump itself. So the cables running out of the load are connected to the cables coming out of the sunlight pump. So the good thing about MC4 connectors is that there are male connectors and female connectors, and besides being very sturdy, they also have the property that you cannot connect a female with a female or a male with a male, so there's no mistakes that can be made here. So as soon as I connect these charges, these cables, the pump will begin to light up and then pump water. To make sure that I am in the right mode, I will need to quickly look at the interface. The interface has a start button and a stop button, and if I connect these cables, I will be automatically in the solar panel mode. So the solar panel mode just takes the maximum energy that is being delivered by the solar panels. And what we want is we want to work in a battery mode, because currently we're connected to batteries. So to do that, once I turn on the pump, I will need to press the start and the stop button at the same time for a short period of time, and then the lamps will blink and I will be turned onto the battery mode. So now that I'm ready to make the connection, I can make one side and the other side. In our case, we've got a charge controller that doesn't automatically start off. So I'll turn on the charge. Now the sunlight pump is already in battery mode, it's running. In case it does not detect that there is a battery connected, what you need to do is you need to press these two buttons for a short period of time until this light here stops to blink. And it is in battery, no, other way around. So if this light is not blinking and the pump automatically starts running, just press these two buttons until your light starts blinking. Now that we're in the right mode, battery mode, we can start and stop the pump with these two buttons. So my suction side is in my bucket of water, and my output side I've got in my hand, and I will let the water flow through the system. You'll see in the first moments the water will still be will not flow immediately, but be pumped through the system, and a little bit of air that is now located in the hoses will need to be pushed out through the hoses, so that only water is flowing through them. Let's have a look what happens if I press on start. You see that there's a very low water flow, or no water flow currently. This is on one side because there's still air in the system. On the other side, it's because we're running on a very low setting. If we want to increase the setting, so now water is actually flowing. If we want to increase the water flow, I can press the start button several times. And as you can hear, the water flow increases. If I press the stop button, the water flow decreases again up to the point when there's no water flowing anymore. So this goes in small increments. With every press of the start button, it goes up. With every press of the stop button, it goes down again. Good. If we go back to our quick guide, we'll find out that after starting the sunlight pump, we should let it run for at least 5 minutes so that any air and bubbles inside of the hoses can slowly get out of the pump. We won't demonstrate this step, you can, but make sure to let it run in a new setup for 5 minutes before you leave the sunlight pump, and just let it run on its own account. When the sunlight pump is stopped by low power input, this can happen if your batteries are depleted, or if your solar panels don't get enough energy. The sunlight pump will turn off, and it will try to restart automatically after 90 seconds if it is in solar mode. This is a function that allows the sunlight pump to start again if there was shade on the panels and the shade is now gone again. So it has this kind of automated restart mode after 90 seconds. So if the water output is weak despite high power input, you can hold the delivery hose underwater to check if there is a leakage, or if there is air in this coming out of the pump. So if you hold it into a water source and you see that the water that is being pumped out has bubbles in it, this means that there is probably a leakage somewhere in the system and air is being pulled into the water that is being pumped. This obviously causes a lower water output. The next point is changing the operation mode. We've already had a close look at this. So again, as a reminder, if you're in battery mode and want to change the solar mode, or you're in solar mode and want to change the battery modes, these are the only two modes. Just press the two buttons for a small period of time until the indicator changes its state. Next up is how to use the sunlight pump app. So for this, let's get out our phones.